Can you imagine a country where the law tells you who you can marry, where you're allowed to live, and even what your race is, all based on the color of your skin? Well, that was the reality in South Africa under apartheid. It was a system literally designed for separation. So let's get into how it was built and how it was eventually torn down. The name of the system tells you everything you need to know. Apartheid is an Afrikaans word, and it literally means separateness. That wasn't just some side effect of the policy, it was the entire goal, to engineer a society built on a foundation of total racial division. All right, so an idea is one thing, but how do you turn it into the law of the land? Well, you need power, and that power arrived in 1948 when the National Party won the general election. They didn't waste any time, they immediately got to work building the legal architecture for segregation, piece by piece. And the speed at which they did it is just breathtaking. In just 5 years, the government laid the entire legal groundwork. Think about it. Laws that banned interracial marriage, laws that made relationships illegal, laws that classified every single person by race, and laws that told them where they could and couldn't live. This wasn't just social custom. This was the full, crushing weight of the government. That Population Registration Act was really the cruel heart of the whole system. To enforce these categories, officials used these absurd and just humiliating methods. Probably the most infamous was something called the pencil test. They'd literally stick a pencil in a person's hair. If you shook your head and the pencil stayed in, you were classified as black. A simple, horrifying test that could tear families apart, branding one sibling as colored and another as black. Just unbelievable. So the laws are on the books. But what did that actually mean for the millions of people living in this new reality every single day? What did it feel like to wake up in this world? You have to understand, the system really operated on 2 levels. First, there was what they called petty apartheid. This was the stuff of daily humiliation. Separate park benches, separate buses, separate beaches. But then there was grand apartheid, which was so much more sinister. This was the long-term plan, to strip Black South Africans of their citizenship completely by forcing them into these economically starved homelands. I mean, just try to imagine a world where every single public space is a constant reminder of your supposed inferiority, where even in a life-or-death emergency, an ambulance driver might refuse to take you to the closest hospital because it was for the wrong race. That level of inequality was just woven into the very fabric of day-to-day life. Get ready for this number. 3.5 million. That's the estimated number of Black Africans who were forcibly thrown out of their homes between 1960 and 1983. And let's be clear, this wasn't migration. This was one of the largest state-run mass evictions in modern history, all in the name of grand apartheid. And these weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people. They were communities, vibrant, multiracial neighborhoods with their own unique cultures. Places like Sophietown in Johannesburg or District 6 in Cape Town were just bulldozed. People lost everything as their homes were leveled to make way for whites-only areas. Now, a system this brutal, this oppressive, it couldn't exist without a fight. The resistance started from within South Africa, but eventually it would capture the attention of the entire world. So, how do you fight something like this? Well, the struggle against apartheid wasn't just one thing. It was a decades-long fight on so many different fronts, from peaceful protests and civil disobedience to armed resistance and intense international pressure. The Sharpeville massacre was a horrific turning point. Police just opened fire on a peaceful protest against the hated pass laws. It sent a clear, brutal message that the government would use deadly force to stay in power. For groups like the African National Congress, the ANC, this was it. It was proof that peaceful protest alone wasn't going to be enough, and it pushed them to form an armed wing. 16 years later, a whole new generation took to the streets. Students, some of them just kids, in Soweto, rose up against a new rule that would force them to be taught in Afrikaans, the language of their oppressors. Hundreds were killed, but the sheer bravery of these young people reignited the struggle and inspired a whole new wave of activism. And the world was finally really turning against the regime. South Africa was kicked out of the Commonwealth, banned from the Olympics, hit with crippling economic sanctions. Famous artists refused to perform there, sports teams refused to play against them. This global pressure campaign was incredibly effective, and it turned South Africa into an international pariah. So by the late 1980s, you have this perfect storm of resistance from the inside and total isolation from the outside. The pressure just became too much for the apartheid state to handle. The walls were starting to crack.
The end, when it came, happened in this stunning, rapid sequence of events. In 1990, President F.W. de Klerk got up and shocked the world. He unbanned opposition groups like the ANC and announced that political prisoners would be freed, including, of course, Nelson Mandela. That one speech paved the way for negotiations and, 4 years later, that incredible historic election that made Mandela president.
Now, while the 1994 election was the political end of apartheid, this date right here, this is when the legal system itself was officially buried. The core laws that enforced segregation were finally wiped off the books for good. But here's the thing, just getting rid of the laws doesn't magically undo all the damage. Decades of systemic discrimination create these deep, deep economic and social wounds that, well, they just haven't healed. The inequality that was so carefully built by apartheid is still a huge feature of modern South Africa. So the political system of apartheid is gone, but its ghost, you could say, still hangs around in the inequality people face today. See, it only takes a stroke of a pen to repeal a law, but undoing the damage that law did to generations of people, that's the work of a lifetime. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about.